Zak, welcome to the Intercooler podcast, episode
Thank
250, a landmark episode. We needed a big name guest.
That's quite a few, 250.
Yeah. Well, listen, we should start with a word of congratulations.
Thank you.
For McLaren winning the Constructors' Championship last season. Huge achievement. How has the mood around here changed?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's been an exciting year. It was not easy, as you can imagine. And for all of those people with about 6-7 races to go saying you've got it wrapped up, I think you see how quickly Formula One can change. On Saturday, we were looking pretty good, locking out the front row, and Ferrari had their issue with Leclerc. And then come the first corner, not even the first lap, we had the pressure on and had Lando finished second. Game over. So it came down to the last race, last lap, to get it done, but it felt great.
Can I ask, 10 races into last season, you were third in the Constructors, nearly 100 points behind Red Bull. Did you think it was dead and gone, or did you still think that there was something to fight for? And what happened?
A lot of questions there. Always something to fight for, of course. 10 races in, no, I didn't quite have Constructors' Championship on mine. You know, Max got off to such a great start. We didn't win our first race until Miami, and we were 100 points behind. And before you can think about first, you got to think about second.
Yeah.
And so no, it didn't really till mid-season, probably even Hungary when we were dominant in that race. I thought, you know what, we keep doing what we're doing, we could do this. So it wasn't really till almost the summer break. The team did a great job continuing to develop the race car. Never gave up. All the developments worked, which isn't always the case, but was in ours. And then, of course, we've got two awesome drivers that, without them, we wouldn't have got the job done. Oscar completed every single lap. Lando won 4 races. Oscar won 2 races. Second most amount of podiums ever in a row. I think it was 14, 15.
Wow.
So it was kind of all of that coming together.
There's nothing you can point to which flipped it for you. There wasn't a single development, and was it also a factor of Red Bull going in the other direction while you were still?
I think it was a combination. Ferrari ultimately were as strong as us, so that's who ultimately became the rival there at the very end. I think Miami was obviously clearly a big step forward, so that's one race where that put us in the game. I think the biggest difference in the team has been our people, led by Andrea Stella, and the direction, the focus, and the performance that he's been able to get out of our great team. And but no, in Formula One, it's all about little incremental gains everywhere. So the aero's better, the drive's better, the tire deck's better. Drivers came into their own, and that ultimately all comes together. And I think people think Red Bull went backwards. They didn't go backwards. Everyone just went
forwards faster.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it was McLaren's first Constructors' Championship since 1998.
Long time.
First driver since Lewis Hamilton won with this team in 2008. It's amazing to think this team, with this incredible facility and all the history, went quite so long without winning a championship.
Yeah.
Presumably it won't be that long again?
I hope not. 26 years is a long time.
Sure.
And while I'd still like to be working in 26 years, I'm not sure if it takes another 26. They'd want me to stick around that long.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of guys in your position, and I think it's probably a positive, only look forward. They're not that interested in what has already happened. But you and Williams are now tied for Constructors' Championships. You've won many more races. But I wonder, how much does the history particularly of this team, mean to you? And if you'd got the call from another team, would you just as likely have gone there?
Yeah, good question. I love the history of our sport, and I love the history of McLaren, and that's exactly why I joined. When I joined McLaren, I had a fantastic opportunity to go to Formula One, not another team, but Formula One, the sanctioning body, which was very flattering and a very awesome opportunity. But the one thing it didn't provide that I love is the actual racing. I love the business and I love racing, and so the Formula One opportunity would have been an unbelievable opportunity around the business. But I want to be in the race when the lights go out, and I want to be on pit wall and I want to be on the competitive side. McLaren has always been my favorite team ever since Ayrton Senna joined in 1988, by far. And so no, this is the team I want to be at. I'm lucky I got the call, and I love the history. And so yes, while I'm focused on today and tomorrow, I definitely think about the past, and that comes with a lot of pressure, right? It's an unbelievable brand, racing team. It's had the best drivers in the world, so the responsibility of leading a racing team like McLaren is immense. But I love it.
As we're talking now, it's several weeks to the start of the 2025 season. So I just wonder, as CEO of McLaren Racing, what's keeping you busy in the middle of January?
Making sure that all of our people have what they need. I'm certainly not going to help in the contribution and the technical development of our racing car. There's definitely others doing that. We would be a solid 11th place team on a 10-place grid if I was working on the race car, because I think the safety car would be ahead of us. So I feel like my job is the team doesn't work for me. I work for them. What do they need from me so they can do their job at the best of their ability? Is that more resources, more technology, more people, be left alone, need some guidance? So I very much feel like my job is to support them and getting the best out of them. So Andrea and I have been spending a lot of time walking around the factory floor, checking in with everyone, how are things going, spending a lot of time in the wind tunnel. Then of course there's the whole commercial side of the business, which is an area that I do contribute quite a bit to. I'm very comfortable with, so making sure our partners have what they need. They're getting ramped up for the new season, checking in with the drivers. They're off now in pre-season prep, doing all the training, et cetera. So it's really about checking in on everyone, making sure they have what they need, whether that's fans, partners, team members, drivers. And I think this is a momentum business and it's a culture business. So I spend as much time as I can with our people.
Obviously, last season, because this opportunity, the first opportunity to do this, as you say, in 26 years, presented itself, you had to push like hell all the way to the last lap of the last race. Does that affect this season? There must be teams out there who realise it's all dead and gone quite early on and can therefore just think, well, there's not much to lose by. I think Williams said they've basically given up on the 2025 season because they're putting all their effort into 26. So how will 24 affect your approach to 25, or how has it already?
Well, we get a little bit less wind tunnel time because we won the championship. So that's a good problem to have.
Is that material, though? Does that really make a difference?
About 10%, yeah. I think in Formula One, everything matters because the field right now is covered by less than 2%. So I think maybe in the good old days when you had unlimited budgets and big discrepancies on spend, you could make it up in other areas. But now we all have kind of limited resources and the same level of resources, which is why you saw 7 drivers win multiple races, 4 teams win races. I've never seen that level of competitiveness.
And it's great for the fans, isn't it? And
it's
for
awesome.
People like us.
It's awesome. I mean, we're going to go into this season and I think ourselves, Ferrari, Red Bull, and Merck, I think any of them can win races and win the championship. And I think it would be naive to rule out anyone who's not in the top 4, because look at the big jump we made. And the other 6 teams have the same resources, so there's no reason why they can't do what we did. And I think we understand that, and therefore you got to keep your foot on the throttle, because if you stand still, others are going to be on the moving walkway and get in front of you. So we're running hard.
Has the cost cap net been a good or a bad thing for McLaren?
It's been a great thing. It's been a great thing. Let's start with the sporting aspect. I think the level of competitiveness in the sport and the entire grid, why there's only 4 teams that have won. I think in Abu Dhabi, 1 second covered the entire field. And I was watching, I think it was the 88 Monaco Grand Prix when Senna was on pole by a second and a half. Yeah. Today, a second and a half's the whole field. Back then, it was front row.
Between him and his teammate.
So I think that has a lot to do with rule stability, but also the budget cap. You can't spend your way out of problems. You can't just throw money at it. You need to be very efficient with your resources. So I think that's been great. And then because it was a game of who could afford to lose the most, you constantly had teams in financial trouble because to try and keep up, you had to spend kind of $1 more than you had, and that was unhealthy. And we saw, Williams in trouble. We were in trouble financially. Sauber in trouble. Aston Martin now bought out of administration. So you had 4 teams not that long ago in big trouble. Now you have teams clamoring to join that have now had to pay a big entry fee, as they should, like any other professional sport, to enter the sport. So if you look at what the cost cap has done in that, say, 5 years, you've gone from 4 teams in trouble to people lining up to join and can't get in. And you've gone from, 2 teams winning the last, 10 championships to, enter us. And Aston had a good run at the start of, 23. So I think the cost cap's been wonderful for the sport. And that's why every other sport has some form of, or most other sports, salary cap, cost cap, to bring kind of sporting parity and to keep everyone in business.
Would you be in favour of, so long as they were clearly competitive and could demonstrate that they would be, more teams being on the grid? I mean, I can remember, as you can, when there were over 30 cars and we had pre-qualifying and...
Yeah, I think we clearly put on a great show with 20 cars. We're now going to 22. I think what's important is quality over quantity. So I think if teams can enter and they're not automatically the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th,
Yes.
that doesn't really add any value, right? To your point,
Sure.
when there were 30 cars, you were following F1, I was following F1, no one kind of cared about cars 24 to 30 because they were battling it out for 24th to 30. So I think if we can have quality teams with quality drivers that add value to the sport, then a growing grid. But I think 24 needs to be the max. I don't think having 26 cars adds any incremental value, and it you get some tracks that'll start becoming busy. A lot of the infrastructures only have 10, 11 garages. So you start getting bigger than that, it starts adding things like pre-qualifying and what racing team is going to survive showing up Friday, not making the show and going home.
Yeah, F1 doesn't need a longer tail, does it? It needs a bigger middle. F1 must be such fun when you're winning. You had a lot of that last year. I suspect Abu Dhabi is slightly different. You were winning that race, but it didn't look like it's a whole lot of fun for you.
That was terrible. It was, as I said, that was the worst 2 hours of my life after that first corner. The story I tell, we were 7/10 away from maybe losing the world championship because Carlos was all over Lando. And he comes in and does a 2.2 second pit stop, which is a good pit stop, and comes out, and I think there was like 1.6 seconds. So we do a 2-second pit stop, fastest pit stop of the race. Had we done a 2.7 second pit stop, which is slow but not a disaster, I think we come out, Carlos is behind us in the DRS. And with the dirty air, I think if you come out in the DRS, our slowest sector was the second sector, which was the long straight. So we were set up a little bit more for overall lap time, but compromised our... Carlos gets in front, even though Lando was definitely quicker, you have to be a lot quicker. So, the way I look at it is we were 7/10 away, the difference between a 2-second and 2.7 second pit stop. And so that was not very comfortable.
7/10 of a second away from that.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's amazing, isn't it? It is incredible. So F1, great fun.
So all those people that were, 10 races to go, it's wrapped up.
Yeah.
Came down to 7/10.
Yeah.
In the final
That is
pit stop.
extraordinary. That's why it was so compelling to watch. You also know what F1's like when you're not winning. And actually, quite recently, start of 2023, one of the slowest cars on the grid. But the turnaround was just extraordinary. And did you know that was coming? Or was there just sort of blind hope and faith?
How far ahead can you see?
Yeah, no, I knew trouble was coming. And that's, Andrea. So kind of the backstory there, if you'd like, is you start developing next year's car in, early summer, May, June, July, you're hitting it hard. And in 22, kind of our storyline were the problems, challenges we were having with Daniel Ricciardo. And so that was kind of the headline. Underneath that, I felt our car was, kind of average in 22, but that's not what got all the media attention. We had a big development for France, which was end of June, July, in the 22 car that didn't work. These things happen. What I didn't like was the response from some of the leadership that we had in response to what was a failed development, which happens.
Finger pointing?
No, not finger pointing, but just not recognizing this is a problem. It was like, almost like, it's not working. Well, it was like, no, this is a problem. So at that point, I thought, don't forget, that's the same team that's now working on the 23 car. So I felt we were in trouble with that development, but I was immediately thinking it's kind of the same group that's going to be developing our 23 car. So then we made changes at the end of 23. But at that point, kind of the start of 23, that car is already kind of baked in the oven, if you'd like. So when I promoted Andrea, I said, kind of get on, and he quickly came back and went, we're in trouble. So we announced at the launch that it was going to be a bad start to the season. I didn't think it was going to be that bad, but it was. At the same time, Andrea quickly got on restructuring, empowering the right people, putting people in the right places, giving them the right guidance. And so what happened was we were going racing, getting killed on track, but we knew from our development that our development was doing this. So it was kind of, how do you hold on to your sponsors and your fans and employee morale when publicly you're getting pummeled, but yet back at the factory, you're getting pretty excited about what's going on in the wind tunnel. So the good news was we weren't surprised by 23, and I had made the people changes to fix that, but then it takes that 6 months to get the work to fix it. And then we came out in Austria, one car, Lando very strong, but we're always good in Austria, one car, Lando's good at Austria, so you start asking yourself, was this kind of a one-hit wonder? Then you go to Silverstone, we qualified second and third. Lando leads the race, finishes second. I think Oscar was fourth, got caught out by the safety car, should have been third. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, we've fixed this car. And from that moment onwards, everything we've put on the car has worked.
So I'm so glad that you spoke about people being in the right positions and empowering them to do their best work. I've heard you say that before. That's the key to winning in F1 and probably in business as well. Obviously, that's far easier said than done. But it's no secret. Everyone up and down the pit lane knows that that's what you have to do to win titles. So why is it that great teams with great people don't manage to do that?
Well, I think most of the time they do. It's culture. You can't buy a culture. We all have great wind tunnels and CFD. I mean, we've all have state-of-the-art technology. So it really becomes your differentiator or your people. And not just your individual people, how do you get them to work together? We've all seen sports teams that, have the big names, and then you get the underdogs that win. And what did they do? They were a better team. Maybe not, if you paired them up individual to individual, they're not, but when you put them together, the way they trust each other.
And they end up being greater than some of their parts.
Correct. And so I think that's what, led by Andrea, he's been able to pull together because, let's say we've got about 1,000 people on the Formula One team. When I made the change, I only changed 3 people. So it's 997 people that gave us the car at the beginning of 2023. It's 1,000 people, but 997 of them are still the same that just won us the World Championship. So it was the leadership, the camaraderie, the trust, the transparency, the culture, and you can't buy that. What you need is the right people working together. And Andrea's got a great phrase, poison biscuits. Don't eat the poison biscuits within your own team. And then our sport, maybe a little bit unique to other sports, we all do spend time trying to destabilize the competition. It's very political in that sense. And so I think when you look at Red Bull, which is an unbelievable team with hugely talented people, they've lost some really good people. Yeah. They had their challenges at the beginning of the year, off track. And I think Max Verstappen's an unbelievable driver. They've got a great wind tunnel. They've got a great racing car. What kind of went wrong there is I think the environment was destabilized. They've lost some people. The technology didn't fall apart overnight. And I think it's hard when you're dominant for as long as they have been. And Mercedes, people then want to move on and then they hit a ceiling. So I think it's I hope to have that challenge that 3, 4, 5 years, I've got a team that's used to winning championships and then kind of keeping a hold of them becomes a challenge.
Can we talk a bit about drivers? Let us say very hopefully, that you've got two drivers competing for the World Championship next year. We've seen in the past at McLaren that doesn't necessarily lead to the happiest of pit garages. How do you keep on top of that? You've got two obviously massively competitive drivers, they all are, both wanting to win as much as each other. Your closest teammates or your closest rival's always your teammate. How do you keep things on an even keel?
I think a few ways. One, I used to race, so while not as fast as Lando or Oscar, even though I tell him I am, I understand a lot of the psychology of the sport and what a driver goes through. I think there's a certain way to manage drivers. It's a very emotional, stressful, adrenaline sport. So kind of when and how to work with drivers is important, because people can say things they don't mean or react in certain ways if you approach them at the wrong time, the wrong way. So I think ways of working is important. I think we're fortunate to have Lando and Oscar, because to your point, while they want to beat everybody, themselves included, they're two great guys. And then I think you do it through transparency, fairness, being equitable. And we're not always going to get it right, and we didn't get everything right last year, but we own it, we talk about it, and then you have constant communications and expectations setting before the weekend, before race day morning. So everything's kind of fresh, we spoke about it, and then you try and see what the different circumstances are. I'll give you an example. In Monza, we told the drivers, and I don't think we did a good enough job of being very explicit. We said, don't take any risks. So Lando didn't really defend because he thought, well, let's not take risks. Oscar went, well, the door's wide open.
Yeah, cracking move.
It was a great move, but hey, that's not a risk. The door's open.
Yeah.
What we should have said was, don't pass until we give you the green light, because what we want to do is gap the field. Then you guys are free to race. So you learn by that and go, actually, what would we have done differently in Monza? We would have said, we're going to let you guys race, but let's break away from the field and then race, because we definitely believe in letting our drivers race.
You said just now that you got two great guys as well as two great drivers. Is that in itself a potential problem? Insofar as you look at the multiple world championships, the Ayrtons, the Michaels, the Maxes, even the Lewis, there is a killer instinct in those guys. Do your guys have that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They just don't have it towards
because
us.
It seems...
Which I think is...
It seemed at times last season, for instance, and this is just an outsider's perspective, but that Max was getting in Lando's head.
Yeah, I think, Max is as brutal as you get on track. I mean, the guy's four-time world champion. He's as great of a racing driver as I've ever seen. I think Lando kind of for the first time was at the front of the field on a regular basis come Miami. So I think it was just more... Finally had some wheel-to-wheel combats with Max and had to learn how Max races, where, back when I was racing, you'd come up on someone and well, this guy's going to drive like this or like that. So I don't think it was him being in his head. I think it was more, how's Max going to race? And he was the number one competitor. Same thing Lewis went through with Max. I don't think Max got in Lewis's head, but they had elbows out, and then eventually Lewis went, right, that's how we're going to race. So, here comes Silverstone. So I think that was really more Lando understanding how Max is going to race so he could work on his racecraft against Max.
Yeah.
So does Lando have another level to climb to this season? Does he have it within him and actually fight for the Drivers' Championship?
Oh, yeah, I think both drivers are going to fight for the championship. And I think all drivers always have another level until they get to an age where they're kind of cresting the top of the mountain. I think both of them are going to just get better and better and more experienced. And, you can look back on things like, Austria. Lando was quicker. Fairly easy track to pass on. Easy for me to say, I'm on their wall. And I think they're putting yourself at risk on the outside, even though Max got a penalty, which he deserved. So I don't think Lando did anything wrong there. I think in hindsight, he'd go, you know what? I'm so much quicker. I'll just keep putting pressure on him. And I'll eventually, get them in the DRS zone when it's a little bit easier, because they had, I think it was a 15, 16-second gap. So he had time, but I think that shows the killer instinct of Lando. He wanted to pass him, and he wanted to pass him now, but he learned, okay, maybe because there was enough time in the race. So those are all learnings.
Yeah. Can we just briefly talk 26? What do you make of that? There's been a lot of talk about the regulations. I know there've been a lot of people who've been unhappy about them. What are your views?
I think we'll ultimately sort it out. I've been in Formula One now for 8 years, so I've sat through one big regulation change, and then of course and there's always a bit of drama, and oh my God, it's gonna be a disaster. And then these engineers are so smart, they figure it out. So it is a huge change. I think there is some risk when you have the level of competitiveness that we have right now. I think everyone's let's kind of hope that level of competitiveness is maintained. There's talking about lifting and coast, but we do some of that now, truth be known. So in speaking with the people that know, I think the FIA's listened to the teams. The rules that were initially presented, I think needed refining, which they have, and so I think we'll be in an okay place.
Well, listen, we are very quickly running out of time, so we must leave it there. You're a busy man. We really appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us. And
my pleasure.
We wish you all the best of luck for the 2025 season.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Zach.
Cheers.
Well, Zak Brown has just left the room onto his next appointment. Busy man.
Wow, yeah.
He sort of flies in, chats for half an hour or so.
Yeah.
Great answers,
Yeah.
packed full of interesting stuff, and then he's off and away.
Yeah.
Interesting way to sort of live your life, isn't it? When every minute is accounted for.
Yeah,
There are so many demands on your time.
Yeah, I think that's what guys like that just thrive off.
Yeah.
Really interesting guy. I mean, proper car guy.
Oh,
And that's
absolutely.
that's the takeaway, isn't it?
Just comes through.
Actually, he's many things. He's a businessman, and
Yeah.
he's obviously got a massive marketing background. But at the base, behind it all, is someone who just loves cars and just loves racing.
And he's living his dream, isn't he?
Yeah.
Getting to run a Formula One team like McLaren. It must just be fantastic.
I think it's also very interesting that when he talks with the perspective of a man who himself was an extremely successful racing driver.
Was he?
Yeah.
What can you tell us?
He won. He worked through Formula Ford and Formula 3, and he raced sports car to a high level. He did Indy Lights, that sort of thing. So, when he sort of talks about drivers and teammates and what goes on in the garage, he's been there.
He does know.
He knows. And I think that, and I also think if you're trying to garner, respect within your team, it just helps, doesn't it, that you've been there. Okay, maybe not in a Formula One race, but that you are yourself a massively competitive being.
Yeah.
And when drivers talk to you about what their concerns are, you kind of have an insight and understanding, which if you just come to it because you're a fantastic business person or you could attract lots of money, it's just not going to work like that. Even if you're just a great people person and you're great at organising large workforces, but you could equally be in a factory as a Formula One team. I think just having that behind you, it must make just such a difference.
He's clearly a very intelligent man, and what actually struck me in that discussion was his memory.
Yes.
He recalls exactly when the upgrades came.
Yeah.
He recalls the gaps between drivers in crucial points at certain races. It's all up there.
It's so instructive because, he clearly has a great memory, but also you don't remember the stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, it shows how much it all matters to him, how it all mattered to him. That all those hard points, all those turning points, all those little moments where the season seemed to turn one way or the other are still absolutely up there. Even when you were talking about the beginning of 23, which is 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And him talking about the end of 22 and everything else, he's just, he gets it.
I was just thinking, we know what it's like to start a very, very small business and to work really hard at it, and at times to wonder if it's going in the right direction or not. Mm-hmm. And it's on your mind the entire time, and you worry about it and you're stressed about it, and actually it affects your everyday life, doesn't it?
Of course.
Can you imagine what it's like to be responsible for 1,000 people, an organisation like this with the history that it has, and in 2022, start of 2023, to have a car that's really, really off the pace?
Yeah, but just imagine how good it is when it goes right.
But how would that affect you though, to have all that pressure and to be struggling?
You need to be a certain sort of person. A certain sort of person.
You've got to be tough.
I am absolutely not.
There's a toughness, isn't there, and a
I guess
fortitude.
There is. Yeah.
But you're right, and then when it turns around,
Yeah.
then to win races, win a championship.
At the top level in your chosen field of endeavour. That must just change everything. And that very event must make the chance of it happening again next year more likely.
If you're, say, John Elkann, chairman of Ferrari, and if in a couple of years you still haven't won a championship, are you on the phone to Zak or someone like Zak and saying, come on?
Well, from what he was saying on the podcast, I don't think he'd go.
Sounds it, doesn't it?
He's here because this is where he wants to be.
But he's a man in demand, surely.
Oh, well, I mean, yes, you can't do what he has done. And obviously, you know, we barely mentioned him. I mean, Zak mentioned him a couple of times. We barely mentioned Andrea Stella and the role that he has played in turning this around. I'm sure Zak would be the first to give him full credit for what has happened. I suspect they're both very in demand.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
But, you know, they've gone and done it. And I imagine that Zak is the sort of person who's not going to be happy to just sort of, you know, tick a box and think, well, done that, go off and do something else now. I think he's going to want to make the point.
It's
ram
not
it home a bit.
Is it?
No, absolutely. I would.
If it was me, I'd win one championship and
Thank you
be
very
done.
much. You do a Nico.
I'd do a Nico, yeah, off I go, enjoy my yacht.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be plenty for me, but that's why I would never win a championship.
Well, there's that.
It's a totally different attitude, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was really good fun, a great privilege to get to sit down with Zak Brown for half an hour or so. Now, this might well be the very first time you've come across the Intercooler. We're not just a podcast, we're not just a YouTube channel. In fact, those things are quite a small part of what we do. We're really an online car magazine. There's nothing like the Intercooler. We are a multi-award-winning, ad-free online car magazine. And it's just going from strength to strength. We also have what we believe is the best team of automotive writers working anywhere in the world today. Not just writers, but also expert designers, drivers, engineers. And best of all, you can try our online car magazine absolutely free for 30 days before you give us a single penny to see if it's for you or not. Just head to the-intercooler.com and start your 30-day free trial. People seem to really, really like it. We think you will too. And listen, we appreciate you watching the video or listening to this as a podcast. Please just follow the show, subscribe to this channel. There's much more like it to come.